Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to the Coast-to-Coast Combat Hour. I'm your host, Matthew Hawkins, and as always, I'm joined by my co-host, Ed Carbajal. Weekly, we are brought to you by allaccessmma.com. Check out allaccessmma.com for our video podcast, MMA news, and MMA stories. What's up, brother?
Nothing much, man. Before we get going on this week's podcast, really quick, I wanted to plug the interview I did with Spectation Sports. I spoke with Torres Finney, who's an undefeated middleweight. He'll be fighting on Dana White's Contender Series on October 10th. Normally, my interviews are about 10 minutes long when I do stuff for them. This wound up being going over a little over 20 minutes, and the conversation was so good. It will be the second half of this podcast. So for folks watching, if you're watching the stream and you want to jump to that, it's already up on Spectation Sports YouTube channel. I put the link below if you want to click that and check it out and come back to us later. But if you're listening on Spotify, it'll be an audio-only version this week on Spotify for that reason, because I'm going to plug in the audio of after this audio for this week's podcast. So I wanted to plug that really quick before we move on. And then one more thing before we start talking about Korean Zombie. You saw me hold up this wasn't a big piece of cheese. I got sent a gi to do my very first gi review. It'll be on this YouTube channel, the Blogboard Jungle YouTube channel, when it's done. Some couple of quick plugs, but yeah.
Well, no one will have a problem seeing you when you approach the gym with that thing on. But yeah. So like as you said, we're gonna have we're gonna get into the Korean Zombie here. I don't know if you want to start. I don't know. I feel like I'm going to get some hate if I really kind of spew everything I think about and the career, I would say, I guess, of the Korean Zombie. So I want to avoid getting death threats. So I guess I'll just jump into it. So I obviously super entertaining fighter. Went out on his shield. We always want to see that happen. When our fighting heroes and guys we really enjoyed watching go out. I never saw him fight live, which is one of the so he's one of the kind of the bigger name guys that I never got to catch. So I don't have a personal, which I have a lot of going to fights. He also never fought on any of the real big cards. If you think back, like there was no Madison Square Gardens. I don't think he was ever on any of the fight weeks.
Yeah.
So
it's always like a UFC on Fox or a fight night type of situation. You're right about that, but I'll give my 2 cents on that when
so basically all I'm getting is a super entertaining guy. I in my world he's not a Hall of Famer, and maybe that'll get people to hate me, but his record was 7-5 in the UFC. He was 0-2 in WEC. I go back to watching him World Victory Road Sengoku when he was 2-1. Obviously a super exciting fighter. Fireworks. He'll make the UFC Hall of Fame because of who they put in it. It's just in my world, he's just a click below the elite. He was always super fun to watch. Now, obviously, he had terrible injury bug, and he had to do his years in military.
Yeah.
So he lost a huge chunk of his prime.
Yeah.
So there is that to be included. But if we're just looking at his resume as a fighter, I mean, I love the guy. I watched it. I never missed any of his fights. But at the same time, he's basically a 500 fighter who put on fun shows.
Well,
and go ahead.
No, just to piggyback off because you just mentioned his military service and the injury, and shout out to the guys I train with at Advanced Martial Arts. We were just talking about this last night after class. One of the things about this sport, and we've seen it not just with him, we see if they have to step away from the sport, especially now at the level these guys train at now. If for any reason they have to step away, it leaves they get left behind, and then they come back and then they have to play catch up. Like Connor hasn't been the same since he fought Mayweather. He came back and that's when he started picking up his L's. And the same thing with Zombie. He had to do his military service, and then he got an injury, so that was a lot of time away. So because of that is why it's hard to disagree with what you just said, because he lost all that time, so he never got to be, like you said, the main eventer, the pay-per-view guy, you know what I mean, and all that stuff. So I feel like just somebody put something on Twitter the other day that they were just like, he just had bad luck outside of fighting with the military and all the injuries and stuff like that. And I think that's kind of why so many people were into the whole retirement thing and the way he went out and stuff like that. And for me personally, the fact that, I mean, I never, as far as the way he fought, he just kept charging at people, and he did that from beginning to end, and I think that's one of the things folks really liked about him, are going to miss about him. So martial artists that compete at that level, um I think only they know when their time is done, and I'll have more to say on that later, when we close out. But yeah, it's just something that's, I think, is part of just the martial arts way. And yeah, I think he did enough. I think he did enough, but like
I don't necessarily think he's done either. He
oh
is only 30, what, 36, 37 years old. I would not
yeah,
be surprised. And it might not be in the UFC. Maybe it's in a Korean event. Maybe it's something in Asia. But it
maybe
wouldn't
one
surprise.
championship, which I would really like.
Maybe but I don't. I imagine he's probably still got a contract with the UFC, and
Yeah,
I mean, he's a big enough name, and like enough people. Obviously, the world loves the guy, so I don't know if he'd be the one that they'd let go. Like
yeah.
they would probably try to string him along, and
Well, if you're
I just
following that antitrust lawsuit and all the contract stuff that's out, apparently they lock in their likeness and their any catchphrases and anything else they do. If you want the ins and outs of that,
well,
Eric McGracken is literally highlighting every piece of that antitrust lawsuit for you, on his TikTok or wherever he puts it on X too, or Twitter. So, but yeah, I feel like because of that, though, because of that heat, I think it might be a little easier to get out of the UFC than it used to be from way back when.
probably, and maybe they'd grant it if he decided to not,
Hmm.
compete like in the United States
Hmm.
necessarily. Like if he stayed away from, okay, you can go fight in one, but you can't fight in their US card. You know what I
Mm.
mean? That kind of thing. That wouldn't surprise me if you kind of work something like that out down the line. That antitrust thing is interesting. I mean, I did hear John Fitch mention something about like the idea of maxing it out at like 1 year contracts for
Mm.
fighters, and it sounds like the Wild West, but I got to be honest, the Wild West sounds kind of good to me right now. Like, you know what I mean? Like with the idea of guys
Well,
knowing that, like, they're
yeah.
one, like you're a fight away from fighting Francis Ngannou, no matter what organization
Hmm.
he's in. That kind of thing. Just, you know, I find, I find maybe fun. It might turn us into boxing, but
Yeah,
I
I
feel
was
like
just
we're
gonna
kind of,
say.
I feel like we're kind of already there. And
Yeah,
I know
yeah.
there's a lot of loyal, UFC fans, and I mean, Bellator does it too. It's not like it's just UFCs. We tend to occasionally you get that just top filled card, and a lot of filler, and it's all MMA organizations. Some of them don't have as many events as UFC, so they don't have to water it down, as much. They don't have a 500-man roster, but
Hmm.
I do like the idea of it being competitive and guys being able to negotiate more often. I mean, we see these guys become free agents, and it's like, it's news. It
Hmm.
really shouldn't be news that guys are able to negotiate some money for them. Like we're our minds blown when the best heavyweight in the world gets a big contract, and it's just like that shouldn't be that way. It should be like, okay, well, so Nagano's signing for a year with one. He's going to go fight Tyson Fury. He's going to go do
Hmm.
something else, and then if he beats Tyson Fury, the UFC can offer him next year $100 million, and he can go back to the UFC. You know what
Hmm.
I mean? Like that should be how it is. Bellator, you know, in theory, Fedor 10 years ago could have won his fight in M1 and fought in and gone, okay, I'm going to fight in UFC. I'm not going to give you my likeness and everything, but I'm going to fight for a 2 fight contract over a year. If it works, it works. If not, I'll come back to Russia. I'll go back to Japan. I mean, all that stuff would have just made, Randy Couture would have fought Fedor.
Hmm.
Those things would have happened because you wouldn't have been able to stop him. BJ Penn and him trying to fight, everybody in the world and stuff going on when he was going, toe to toe with the UFC on stuff. So, um, I think it's Wild West, but I think that maybe we need that kind of shakeup to kind of regroup everything and figure out like what this sport actually is, because I feel like we're kind of in a weird s-
Hmm.
place right now where we know what we have, but is this what we want the sport to be? Do we want guys making 10 and 10? you know do we
Yeah.
want, you saw the payouts for this past pay-per-view came out, and like O'Malley and Sterling only made 500K.
Hmm.
I mean, are we taught they're promoting him as the greatest, bantamweight of all time going into the show, and he's making $500,000.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't I don't. To me, like he should be making $5 million. Like that. The number just seems really weird to me. That and then they'll go, oh yeah, we sold fucking 600,000 pay-per-views at
Yeah,
100 bucks
yeah.
a pop. So that's another rant for another day. I feel like we want to jump back to Korean Zombie a little bit. I mean, again, you know,
Yeah, the other thing about Korean Zombie retiring, I mean, that's bothering me, and it prompted me to write something in my newsletter that I do. Because we're seeing, and we said it before in another podcast, we're seeing a lot of retirements in MMA. It seems like there's more now more than ever since as long as we've been watching the sport. But the thing about it is, like, that bothers me about this one. I don't know if you felt like this when he retired, but I remember when Korean Zombie was like the hot new guy. It feels like it was like yesterday. So the fact that, like,
oh,
yeah, it feels like it's making me feel old that he's like retiring from fighting. But like you said too, man, it's professional sports. Henry Cejudo retired, came back. Like, so that I feel like that itch is gonna need a scratch again once he sits home and he gets bored and he feels like maybe I don't like this normal life stuff, man. I got a couple more fights in me. I think every athlete goes through that in some shape or form. So that kind of makes me not feel as old. But I don't know if that's how you
oh,
felt.
it don't make me feel any younger. That's
Yeah,
for sure. But
yeah.
yeah, I mean, we're coming to the end of the like second generation now
Mhm.
of MMA stars, and that definitely is, we had them all go from, Henderson to Liddell to, Tito hung on for a little longer, but
Mhm.
still was essentially out of the game,
Mhm.
we're 10 years ago now, 10, 12 years ago. Rich Franklin's and all the, Matt Hughes, all, the original crop of, you know, badass dudes that carried the UFC and made them what they are today. And now you're seeing, like, now all the Pride guys are gone, and
Yeah.
now we're gonna get to the point where there's not gonna be a lot of WEC guys left. We're gonna be
Mhm.
going, hey, Cub Swanson is the last WEC guy,
Yeah, I actually thought that last fight, I felt like he was going to retire, but I was kind of glad that he didn't. So.
Yeah, I mean, but and again, I don't want to come off. I mean, Korean Zombie's great. I wish everybody was Korean Zombie. I wish that's what all the fighters were.
Mm.
But I have a big, I have a Mount Rushmore. I have a top, group of fighters, and to me, he's just a tick lower than that. And you know, he'll get into
Yeah.
the UFC Hall of Fame if guys like, Cerrone and you know but those guys headlined events too. That's where, like you said, it's really weird because he was never on any of the big cards, so he didn't really get that showcase,
Mhm.
which actually makes it almost more amazing how famous he is. I mean, he has an
Mhm.
awesome nickname. He's got a cool logo and a cool shirt.
Yeah,
That's
he's.
like the one thing I remember is going to an early expo and there being a bunch of the Korean Zombie shirts out,
Mhm.
before
Yeah.
every sponsor was taken away
Yeah,
from all
yeah.
these guys. But I guess we maybe should jump into, I guess, the Mirab Dashvili situation for a couple
Yeah,
minutes, real
that
quick.
that's that definitely deserves some talking about. I know Dana White only made the comment or said the comment again last night how he's just hating on the fact that two teammates actually don't want to fight each other. My response to that when I saw it was, and I somebody put it on Twitter and I wrote it on the bottom. I wish I'd have to look and find it, but that's coming from a guy that hasn't like been through anything with. You build relationships when you share mats with somebody in martial arts or a training room or dojo. The gym, the culture, it's very familial. And if you happen to be in the same, like, competition or whatever, there's always that it just feels taboo to cross hands with, even though you do it in practice all the time. To do it to the point where someone can get seriously injured and XYZ, for a title. um I understand where Sterling and Devashvili are coming from, and I think you have to I think you have to be in that culture to understand that. Dana White obviously is not. I know he's done Golden Gloves boxing or whatever the fuck he did before he got rich and famous, and some white belt jiu-jitsu stuff, because he said he tried it with the Fertitas back in the day. But I just feel like sometimes when you get all the billions of dollars put him so far away from that, I think he forgot that. And I know he's a promoter. His job is to say shit like that, but it is kind of dickish. And the fact that you were talking about how he's talking about the fact that he's bringing that up versus Mirab against O'Malley, who the rankings says that should be what happened next. I think he said all that shit to avoid that fight because, you know, he said it again last night too. You know, O'Malley's going to make a lot of money. When they say that, when he says stuff like that, he means we're going to make a lot of money off of you.
Mhm.
And they want to. O'Malley's a young man, healthy. You know, they probably want to keep that cash cow flowing as long as they can.
Yeah, I mean, you said it perfectly right there. I'll just add that, like, money to Dana White, money's the most important thing, and money's what makes everything go, and money's his best friend. When you got guys that are in the trenches together and have spilled blood on
Mm-hmm.
mats together and stuff, like, this is not you. If they fought each other and somebody paralyzed the other one, if
Mm-hmm.
somebody permanently disfigure. I mean, I just don't. It's all of a sudden that money, and they're not making enough money. They're not making. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sorry. If you're gonna fight each other and you're best friends or you're that close, you got to change my life. You got to make this
Mm-hmm.
where my grandkids don't have to work.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's how this has to be. Like, what do you? I mean, I don't get it, and this is gonna be maybe a stupid joke, but like anybody that hit their wives doesn't surprise me that he would want two friends to fight each other. Like there's obviously not. He doesn't have that. He doesn't have that thing. Everything's about money. It's all about making money. And
Mm-hmm.
and on top of it, they're not even saying they won't fight each other. It's just, and that's where the MMA media jumps in. Correct the dude at the press conference. Let
Well,
him know that Mirab, nobody's turning down any
yeah,
fights. They're
they
happy
don't they
for
don't
each
want to
other.
lose that little credential, though.
They're they they're they
Yeah.
both want the fight, but they both have no problem if the other one gets the fight. It all you have to do is see what they're saying, and that's what it is. But instead, he gets asked some baited question,
Mm-hmm.
never gets corrected, and he goes off on some rant about how if you're in this sport, it's the equivalent of being a major league baseball player and your manager telling you to bean your brother in the face with a pitch. If you're not willing to throw at your brother's head, then you shouldn't be in major league baseball. No, that's not how this works.
Mm-hmm.
That's not how this works. That's this is violence. This is violence against each other, and this is not a normal sport. This isn't basketball. This
Mm-hmm.
isn't this isn't a pickup game of basketball. You can physically, people have died in this sport.
Mm-hmm.
So and you get two guys at that level, who knows what can happen. And one day it will happen, and Dana White's going to go, well, look, yeah, he died, but at least his kids made 45,000 plus 45,
Mm-hmm.
or I'll give him his win bonus. Sure, he died, but I'll give his kids the extra 40 grand in the win bonus. I mean, it's just old. It's just old.
Yeah.
It's just old. He's the worst he's the best worst promoter in the world.
Yeah.
He promotes the brand like crazy, but he bashes his fighters, and it's bizarre as hell. It's just bizarre as hell.
Yeah. Yeah. It is. Um. Um. Before we only have a few minutes left, so really quick, we should mention that there is a as we're talking shit about the UFC. Of course, there's another UFC this weekend. It's on ESPN Plus. Cyril Gane versus Sergey Spivak. The card is actually really good. I hate that it's only on ESPN Plus. I feel like it should be on regular ESPN because you got that fight as a main event. Namajunas versus Manon Fiorot. Volkan Ozdemir is on the card. I mean, he's still ranked number 9. The card's not that bad. So, and it's I guess it's earlier for you than it is for me. It's a 3 p.m. Eastern start time. So, Saturday afternoons I'm running around. I'll definitely miss it even if I was dumb enough to pay for ESPN Plus. But
No, it's a good couple fights. I mean, Gone. I think it's a terrible matchup for him after seeing what Jones did it onto the ground. I think Spivak takes him down and bullies him around, and
mm,
I think Gone. In my opinion, I think we end up seeing Gone kind of wash out and be a surprise. Like
yeah,
I feel like that's going to happen. I don't. Maybe they'll say John Jones took his soul, or they'll figure. You know what I mean? And maybe that's what happened. But
yeah,
if he loses this fight, I have a feeling like it's going to be a downward slide, and we might not be seeing much of him.
mm,
Um, I feel like Rose needs to pick up a win. We know where she's at usually, kind of mentally, kind of all over the place.
yeah,
If she were to lose this fight, I don't know. I don't know where
yeah,
she would go from there.
yeah, and it's gonna be that last fight with her and Esparza that left a bad taste in a lot of people's mouths. So I think both of them kind of have that duty to. I mean, well, Esparza already fought and lost, but like now from that fight, Namajunas kind of has to remind folks that she if she still wants to be there, she's gonna have to prove it on Saturday, and if she doesn't, we'll see it. Based on the result, we'll definitely see it. Um, so I mean, we're gonna wrap up now just because the time. Again, the Torres Finney interview is 22 minutes. It'll be following right after we close out here when Matt does the closeout. But I just wanted to say one last thing, a kind of a dedication for this week's podcast. As we talk about it, the martial arts culture and MMA retirement and stuff like that. Oddly enough, for me over the weekend, my original kickboxing instructor, Victor Garcia, I got word on Monday that he passed away. Victor Garcia was I to this day I use his jab counter. Victor Garcia Canelo is his full name. To this day I use his jab counter when I start anything striking, when I'm sparring and stuff like that, and it literally, since I was 16 up to now, so it's like 30 years. It works on everybody that I use it on. I'm not, called me off guard. The last time I talked to him was maybe 5-6 years ago. I'm in Jersey. He moved down to Florida, but he visited. We ran into each other, and I let him know that I was training in other arts or whatever. But he was, when I took martial arts seriously, Victor Garcia was the first person that I went with. I didn't make a lot of money. I had a little bit of money, and he was the first person that I was like, how much is it? And I walked to his gym every day. Even when he moved, he had a hard time staying open back then because not a lot of people are anxious to fight or practice fighting back then. Combat sports wasn't what it is now, but somebody, I forget the name of the dude that coined Benny Nyla knows the guy that coined the term long pants kickboxing. You can see from the photo, Victor Garcia was that was the type of kickboxing I did. When you hear me talk about kickboxing, and he was my first instructor, so I wanted to dedicate this podcast to him. May he rest in peace, Victor Garcia. So I just wanted to close out with that because fucked with me, obviously, when I got the news, and definitely somebody that had an impact on my life. So rest in peace, sir.
Yeah, definitely rest in peace, and best to his family and friends. Fans can check us out at Combat Hour on X, Coast to Coast Combat Hour on Instagram. Follow me, Matthew Hawkins, at X at MMA Hawk 21. Also on Instagram at MMA Hawk 21. Check out Ed on X at Carbazol, on Instagram at Carbeerzol, and Old Head Carb on Twitch. And again, you can always check out our video podcast at allaccessmma.com. Check out allaccessmma.com for our MMA news, MMA stories, and our video podcast, as mentioned. Enjoy the weekend, everybody.
And stay tuned for the Torres Finney interview.
Thanks for listening.